I've never much cared about what surface I cut my food on, but when you use something every day, you might as well get a good one. And this guy ain't cutting it anymore. 1, it's too small. 2, it's slightly warped and a little wobbly on one side. 3, it slides around unless I put a wet towel or something under it for traction. Sure, I could buy a Primo one, but I never enjoy using it as much as one that I make myself. So I'm headed back to that magical workshop in the woods where hopefully I can make something special. So in my research on making your own cutting board that I was doing before this video, I discovered that there are 3 main ways to make a cutting board out of wood. And that depends on which type of grain, which direction of grain is going to become the cutting surface. So you can just use a board, and that means that the face grain becomes the cutting surface. And that works, but apparently it dulls your knives more quickly because your knife is cutting just right against that hard surface of the grain, and the cutting board can get marked up more easily. Then you can use the end grain, which is on the opposite end of that spectrum. And you get end grain if you simply cut a cookie off of a log. And now you're cutting into like the bottom or the top vertical growth of how the tree grew. And if you just cut a cookie, you get an end grain cutting board, but a cookie will split rather easily and is not very durable in that aspect, especially as the wood dries out, it can split, and now you have a big gash in your cutting board, which is not what you want. So a lot of times people will glue together a bunch of pieces of end grain, whether they're strips or blocks or different geometric shapes, and you get a cool result, but it's a lot of work and a bunch of gluing. And then once you have that end grain surface to cut into, the knife blade slips in between the wood fibers, and that helps the knife remain sharp and also helps the cutting board prevent marks from the knives because it has like a self-healing property. And then in between face grain and end grain, you've got edge grain. So you can imagine a board, you cut along the side of that board, now you have a strip of wood, and you glue a bunch of those strips together, you've got an edge grain cutting board, which is kind of the middle ground in between the 2 extremes. What am I gonna do today? I'm gonna do the easiest option, the face grain single piece cutting board, and I'm gonna see how that goes. I wanna discover firsthand if a face grain board, which would be the simplest and easiest to make, can function as well as I want it to. I don't mind sharpening my knives every once in a while. I would rather the board not get gouged too deeply to the point where it impacts performance, but I don't mind if it gets some knife marks occasionally. So let's make it and then let's test it. Here we go again. What is that?
It's maple. Run it through the planer, flatten it out. Ready it out. Western red cedar. Feel the difference in the weight.
Yeah, I think the tighter the grain, the heavier the wood, the better. Well, I'd rather not have a hole in my cutting board in the center.
Yeah. Well, you got pretty good size chunk. Cutting out the divots, 12 by 14.
Somewhat larger than that.
Okay.
What did I tell you on the phone?
I forget. 18 maybe.
I think I said 18 by 24.
That likely is not going to happen out of a single piece.
Wild live edge could be handsome to use. I'd probably want one edge to be flat.
Yeah, I've got some interesting pieces that could be cut down to your size. one thing to consider is that if we're going to plane it down, it needs to be no more than about 14.5 inches wide. So
Okay.
you would not be planing it. I presume it'd be a belt sanding job or a wide belt sanding job on the big machine over there.
Which big machine?
This big machine.
I've not used this one.
It's cool. Yeah, you need to get checked out on this. Forgot about this when you were making your cat post. I've got this one all shaped and prepped to make our own cat scratch post. I just haven't done it yet. Where it exceeds over any other piece of wood I have is in rot resistance. It does not rot.
A cutting board that lasts for 200 years.
Well, it won't rot at least.
Is this maple as well?
That is maple, as is this. This would make an attractive cutting board,
Yeah.
but thinner.
Thinner.
That pattern is called bird's eye.
A lot of options.
Mm-hmm.
Ready to take a look at the black walnut?
Let's go.
Did it all come from the same source?
Two different places. Either a tree in Estacada that had become a nuisance, and I assisted in its demolition. I connected the property owner with the guy who had the necessary resources to remove rather large amounts of black walnut logs, and I got some of the smaller ones. Now, if you can make $4,000 from a video, making something out of it, that could very well be its highest and best use.
It'd be a big cutting board, huh?
Yes. For this piece, see what you think about this. 4/4 bird's eye, some kind of elm, I think. Be a pretty good sized cutting board. You could get a straight edge here, and this is really unique. Those are spacer blocks for MG1 end panels. And I've abandoned that project. But imagine your cutting board had a handle.
Yeah. Just want to look at this thinner piece back here.
That could be nice. Now this piece, I see this being a coffee table.
Pretty impressive wood storage basement.
Well, your average viewer is not going to have this kind of resource available.
Well, just give them the address here. They can come pick up a piece. Mom would like that.
So if we got a little tiny bit left here that did not cut, why don't you stand over here? What I'm going to do is lift this up and finish the cut.
Okay. Hey, it's the beginning of a cutting board.
All right, so to operate the big planer, we need this machine, not that planer.
Okay.
All right, so you see, plane in the middle,
Yeah.
because it's crowned.
Not flat.
We're taking one pass up there. regardless of how sharp the planer knives are, it very rarely gives you a finish-ready surface. There's always a little roughness, the way the fibers tear out, the way it cuts. This is pretty good, it's not bad, but before you start to put a finish on here, a few passes through the big sander will help a lot. Very important, before you even think about turning this on, you turn this on. This little air valve right here. So now I've got compressed air coming into here. And what that does, we'll need to come over here. This tightens the belt. There's a pneumatic cylinder which oscillates this back and forth, causes the belt to move back and forth. If the belt gets out of track, these little levers here shut the machine down. Now in a minute that air compressor is going to turn on and it's horribly loud. Eventually I'd like to move it outside this wall and plumb it through because it's obnoxious. And it's not that bad if you're not trying to take a video or have a conversation.
Oh, if you do choose to wear a respirator while doing your sanding, just make sure you put those filters on properly. So what I've got now is a fairly pretty shaped and sanded piece of wood. Single board concept for a cutting board. Now I'm gonna go get some epoxy to fill in these little checks and holes in the center of my cutting board because I can't have holes in the center soaking up liquids and rotting my cutting board from the inside out. One other thing to note is it does have a little bit of bug damage in the sapwood on the edge, on some of the edges. So I'm not gonna fill those with epoxy. I'll just let the mineral oil soak in there and hope that it doesn't cause a problem. I have a mouse in this bucket. It's a bucket full of compost scraps that my mother had yet to take to the compost pile. And this mouse found its way in and now of course can't find its way out. So I'm gonna walk him far away from the house and the cars, let him go. Hey buddy, I'm not gonna hurt you. So I decided that instead of using epoxy to fill these holes, I'm going to mix super glue with this chop saw dust and use that instead. This may turn out not very good. We will see. I'll let this dry. And then I'm going to sand it out. I'm also going to wet this board. This causes all the little fibers in the wood to swell and raises the grain, and that introduces a roughness that will remain once it dries. And then I'll sand it again to achieve maximum smoothness. It's the morning. We've let the board dry, we've let the glue harden. Now it's time to give it another sand. Okay, that's probably 15 minutes of sanding. Now, I sanded all the super glue off the surface of the board. Now all that should be left is the glue underneath the surface, plugging those holes. And if it's not perfect, I did not plug the back, so any liquid should be able to drip out and dry that way. I also sanded the whole surface with 180. Now I'm gonna go for 220 after wiping off all the dust with the dry cloth so it doesn't get in the way of the finer grit. Now for the most exciting part, when we get to see this board brighten up. I'm about to put some mineral oil all over the board. This is food grade mineral oil, very commonly used on cutting boards. It will soak into the pores of the wood and prevent moisture from getting in there or other oils from staining the wood. Here we go. Be fairly liberal with the application. Let it soak in, and we can wipe off any extra later. I'm going to coat all the edges and the back as well. Okay, I've got it completely coated in oil. I think I'm gonna let it soak in for a few hours and then apply a second coat before I start attaching my hardware. Time for a second coat. Another way of doing this is to put a bunch of mineral oil on it, put it inside a trash bag, use the interior walls of the trash bag to rub it all over the piece of wood, and then just leave it sit there for a few hours. That's probably more effective, but then I wouldn't have gotten that cool shot of the oil being rubbed in for the first time. At this point, I'm also going to attach 4 rubber feet to the bottom side of the board. Okay. Once the oil is soaked in for long enough, I'll wipe off any excess, and then we'll do a cut test. Time to give it a cut test. This is where everything I've done so far, making this beautiful board, could completely fall apart and all be for naught if this is easily gouged and ravaged by knives and just is destroyed by cutting on it, which is what it's built for, because after all, there is a reason that most cutting boards are made of edge grain or end grain. But we're gonna test it out. I've got a tiny apple here I'm gonna cut with a chef's knife, and a boule that I baked I'll cut with a serrated blade. And I'm tempted to be gentle so as not to mark up my beauty that I just made, but I'm not going to. I'm just gonna cut like I would normally cut. Not going gentle, not going easy on it at all. Okay, I've got some apple slices. And, you know, I'm not seeing. Okay, maybe, oh yeah, I do see marks. But they're small, you know, and it's not like a regular cutting board is immune to marks. But it wasn't immediately destroyed. All right, let's try the serrated blade with the boule now. Let's see how this does. This has pretty thick lower crust, so I have to slice pretty hard. All right. Oh, yeah. definitely put a gouge into the board. Again, not the end of the world. All cutting boards get marked up, but that is a pretty significant mark. Maybe I'll post an update in a few months, show you just how ravaged by knives this thing has become, or if it's doing good enough. And just a face grain single board is good enough for a custom cutting board. If this video gets 2,000 likes, I will make an end grain cutting board and see how that compares. What am I doing?
Yes, what are you doing?
You're on the reaction couch.
I don't want to be on the
I need to get your reaction.
Ooh, fancy. Ooh, so smooth again. Oh, I like that. Your dad's favorite.
So smooth again? What do you mean again?
I remember I said that for the pan, and now I'm saying it for the cutting board. So smooth.
Oh, okay.
It's so nice.
It is smooth. It is the face grain, which means it's more vulnerable to scratching up. And I did test that. I cut a slice of bread. You can see
yeah.
there's a mark. So it will get marked up, but we'll see how badly over the coming months.
Are we gonna eat some wood?
You might get some micro wood. Better than microplastic.
Where'd you get this?
Amazon.
Nice.
Affiliate link in the description.